Never worry again about sales tax with Davo by Avalara. From collecting to filing to paying, Davo works seamlessly with your POS, backed by a guarantee that your taxes will be paid on time and in full. You take care of the business, we'll take care of the sales tax.
All right, I'm here with RJ Hottovy. RJ, how you doing?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Hey, nice to see you. Everything going good with you?
Yeah, going good. Placer's growing quite a bit. Working with a lot of new restaurant companies these days. Exciting times.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, speaking of exciting times, as you probably know, as well as everybody, industry traffic has taken a really big hit.
Yeah.
This year. Do you have a sense of when this traffic decline has started, or has it been going on for a long time, or is it relatively recent?
If you look last year, we started to see indications of it. A lot of it had to do with inflation. As we started to see food away from home really become a lot more expensive than food at home. That was the indication, but it's gotten progressively worse. If you look at kind of this year, 2024, from the beginning of the year, we had January, which everybody wrote off. Weather was bad everywhere.
Sure.
But then we get to February and March, and we see groceries start to overtake restaurants, and not just full service dining, QSR in particular. That was really the point where we started to see it a lot more pronounced. February, March, April was a bit of a tough month for just about everybody, less tax rebates. It's continued in May. What's interesting now is that if we look at cross-visitation, somebody like McDonald's, their key competitor right now is not Burger King or Wendy's. Their number one competitor is Aldi, all of a sudden. We look back at the first quarter of 2023, 17% of visitors to McDonald's went to Aldi. This year, 25%.
Wow.
So an 8-point jump in the number of visitors that are visiting Aldi that also went to McDonald's. If you look at other chains like that too, the value grocery chains, Aldi, Trader Joe's, Lidl, Grocery Outlet, these are the competitors to QSR. So I think you're exactly right. The focus should be on traffic. And I think it'll be interesting to see as we go through the year. McDonald's obviously talked about a national value promotion. That is probably going to start price wars and get a lot more promotional. We'll see if that is able to claw back traffic for the category. But I think that's the number one pressure is very much inflation is forefront of people's minds. They don't want to spend a lot. They want to stretch their household budget. And if they go into a restaurant and see an entree is going to cost $15 at a QSR location, they're going to find somewhere else.
Yeah. A value war is not, in fact, it's almost here.
It is.
In early February, when Chris Kempczinski on his earnings call essentially sounded the alarm about traffic. That's why he did that.
Oh, exactly.
He was not just telling analysts that this is a problem. He was telling the broader industry.
No, he was. Very much so.
This is an issue that the industry needs to concern itself now. Because the thing is, the thing that people forget, their first quarter actually on a 2-year basis accelerated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then if you, most executives after that earnings call, which was fascinating, most executives would have been like, we did better last quarter.
Yeah.
Because on a 2-year basis, we accelerated.
Yeah.
And we are maintaining share in the industry. That's what we would have heard.
Yeah.
But he's like, we've got issues.
Yeah.
And the general public. And the thing is, you pay attention. Consumers are really focused on price right now.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
The fact that if you look at pre-pandemic to today, the number of visits to grocery locations, it's at its highest point it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
That is people shopping around for deals. That means that they're going to their normal store less frequently. They're going to more channels. They're going to, I'm going to go look at Aldi for something. I'm going to go to Trader Joe's. I'm going to go to Walmart. I'm going to go check out all these different places. Right now, QSR is kind of falling out of that rotation, and I think that's a big issue. Yes, QSR is up on a 5-year basis in terms of overall business, the category, but not the same order that we're seeing grocery stores, convenience stores, dollar stores. That is where the disruption is happening right now. So I think it's right that Chris was sounding the alarm bells here because it's getting worse. I mean, this is the trends that we saw early in the year. We've only started to accelerate from here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's. I mean, you probably heard the Walmart earnings call.
Yeah.
And actively saying repeatedly. I mean, actually, they've been saying it now for a couple of quarters.
Yeah.
That their intent is to get traffic back from restaurants.
Yes. Yeah.
And
You can see what they're doing. I mean, prepared meals, private label products. They're going after this category hard. They're not content. So it now becomes what happens to the restaurant scene. Where we can see it. How quickly are we going to see promotional activity get people back in the stores? It's not just promotional too. It's innovation too. One of the things that people overlook, yes, all the Trader Joe's, they have low prices, but that's not the only thing driving people to the stores. It's the innovation factor. The idea that, I mean, there's a whole set of bloggers and influencers waiting for the moment there's a new product drop at Trader Joe's, and they got to, and people run to the store for it. We haven't seen that level of innovation. We've seen some okay things in the restaurant space, but we really haven't seen that innovation cycle pick up post-pandemic at this point. It's still kind of sluggish, still a lot of focus on repackaging old ideas, really, essentially. We're waiting for that new innovation cycle to get people back excited. So I think even though we're starting to see more of a value promotion, there's also got to be some sort of newness with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, restaurants got to get people excited about coming in.
Exactly.
They don't, they will spend. They'll spend.
Yeah, they will.
I mean, look at Raising Cane's. Look at Wingstop.
Yeah.
Look at Wingstop.
Big numbers.
40% on a 2-year
numbers.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like video game numbers. That's what I told them. And so people will go if you get. And the reason why Wingstop, by the way, can do 20% on 20% is that they got people excited about a chicken sandwich.
Oh yeah.
And it's completely changed the game for them.
It really has.
Well,
I mean, it's amazing. And then, again, people don't often look at that as an innovation, but sometimes, it's just a little bit extra step, a little bit of effort. Sometimes it works like that. So,
yeah. I mean, it's that promotion or that chicken sandwich might be the most complete new product introduction I've seen. And let me explain that. Because it did two things for them. Well, three things. First off, it was a big sales driver.
Yep.
Right? It's clearly driven a lot of sales, and they are clearly incremental sales. That is a very different product from chicken wings.
And it's an incremental visitor too. It's not just the
right.
In terms of new visitors, our data shows completely new audience of bringing in.
I mean, which is like, I mean, you are suddenly gaining a completely different customer at a completely different time of day, in a completely different occasion.
Yeah.
And it worked, and it was relatively simple for them to do.
Yeah.
And it's the same sauces that they had already. So it fit with what they already did. So not only are they chicken wings, as is a very specific occasion. It's more like pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
And so suddenly they're like a completely different chain. And then on top of it, they sell less wings as a percentage of their total sales.
Yeah.
So they're no longer reliant upon the single most volatile commodity.
Exactly.
I mean, you remember how much problem chicken wing costs would have on Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, I remember that. It would be 40 minutes of that on the earnings calls back in the days.
Yeah, like and then it wrecked the chain at one point. Like
it really did. It really did.
It did.
One of the big issues. Like
yeah, and they couldn't because their investors or whatever would just freak out for whatever reason. Like this, if you paid enough attention to chicken wings, it is really cyclical. They'll just have a year in which they're insane. The prices go through the roof, and then it just goes back.
It's never a good thing when your commodity cost chart looks like an EKG graph.
Yeah, I know.
It's not a good thing.
Right. And so they're less reliant on the chicken wing. So that got both sales and price.
And margins.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all exactly right.
Right. It was brilliant and it's just turned out to be really popular.
It reminded me of the chicken sandwich wars a bit away. And so back in, 17, lost a lot of good people back then. It reminded me just, how simple some of this stuff was. I mean, it was putting, this basic chicken sandwich on the menu and what it did for Popeyes, and it repositioned the entire brand. So in a lot of ways, it reminds me of that. It's a different situation with wings and what Popeyes had, but there are some similarities there.
It is. Like, yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget how the chicken sandwich at Popeyes was a big deal.
Yes.
And it changed the trajectory. I mean, you could look at their numbers. Cause I just published a story on this. And, they were doing pretty well before then, and then it just put them in a different
It's
place.
just like nothing else.
Yeah. And, but I don't think most people really appreciate how difficult it was for a bone-in chicken chain
Exactly.
to sell a chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
And both chains have been trying to do it for years and fail.
And yeah, not gotten very far with it.
No.
Yes, exactly.
No. Remember the KFC Zinger?
Yeah.
It was a Zinger. That thing is a monster international.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like, you go, I mean, KFC internationally, by the way, it's just like a vastly different.
It's a very different experience.
Yeah, very different experience. And they can't bring that same sensibility to the United States.
Nah.
And the Zinger, they thought that was going to be, we're going to bring it to the United States, and it's finally going to crack the chicken sandwich code, and then, nothing. And then, so Popeyes was able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. It's that whole category. I mean, it's just amazing looking at the visitation numbers. I mean, we talked about QSR not picking up, as much as grocery and other food retail channels, but chicken is one I would exclude from that. That's obviously been a category. I mean, Chick-fil-A continues to be crazy.
I mean, good.
Raising Cane's. I mean, any of the chains. I mean, and we've got this whole, the hot chicken concepts are right behind it that are doing really well. Dave's doing incredible numbers. We do a lot of work for our QSR customers, and we do cross-visitation who are their direct restaurant competitors. It's almost always Chick-fil-A, Raising Cane's, and then a third chicken concept. Then you get maybe McDonald's and somebody else. It's amazing how many times they pop up in the rankings. It's almost across the board.
Yeah. I mean, chicken is a massive growth I mean, it's incredible.
It is.
So now I want to talk Starbucks.
Sure.
Because you guys had some data in November.
Yeah.
And it was pretty sudden for them.
It was. It really was.
In mid-November. Tell us what happened.
Yes, it was about mid-November is when we started to see a fall off in the visitation trends. And, looking back on it, I mean, some of it I think was pricing. Some of it just, you had some big compares in the year ago period too. You had some new product launches there too. But I think one of the things maybe been a bit overlooked is kind of the emergence of some of the smaller drive-through chains. Not any one competitor. I mean, Dutch Bros had obviously some great numbers this quarter. And then if you look at some of the other players right behind them, the Seven Brews, the Scooters, the PJs, 151, and they're all putting up very similar numbers to Dutch Bros. And so you put a bunch of these together, not just one chain of a couple hundred, it's multiple chains of 1,000 more units, and particularly kind of some of Starbucks growth areas. I think that's been an overlooked factor on this stuff as well, some of the competition. Pricing is probably still the bigger factor at the end of the day, and just, innovation. And they talk about throughput. Obviously, that's something we can get into as well. There is some truth to that. Like the freak or the occasional Starbucks user on a year-over-year basis, way down still. That's getting crushed. It's the power kind of 8 visits or more, or really between 8 and 14 is where they're seeing growth still. It's that anything under 8 visits where either there's congestion or things that preventing people from pricing or whatever it might be. But that's something I think they got to figure out here too.
I think it's a social media problem.
There could be that too.
Way too immediate.
Yeah.
I mean, I see the point. Like, I think Dutch Bros probably are a bit of a beneficiary, maybe.
I think so.
To that, but the thing is about like price, and this is one of the points. Dutch Bros and Seven Brew are not cheaper than Starbucks. Usually, typically, these brands usually fall away.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so when we see a dramatic shift like that, to me, like, there's got to be something else going on, because Starbucks didn't just get expensive overnight.
No, they're typically as a catalyst. You're right.
Yeah, and and then these competitors and their operations. Their operations have issues, and theoretically, you could see customers maybe look at how expensive Starbucks is, and then how much of a wait it is, and how difficult. You go in and you go into some of these locations, and you got a bunch of people waiting for mobile orders and whatnot, and waiting for mobile order is always annoying.
Yeah.
Because you feel I'm making the order now, and it should be ready, and it's not, and that's frustrating. Yes, they do have some operations challenges, but they didn't just emerge overnight. So I liken it to Papa John's in 2007.
Yeah.
That was my comparison. I mean, I think one thing I read was comparing it to Chipotle in 2015, but Chipotle was another world.
I think I like your comparison.
Yeah, but Papa John's in 2017.
Yeah.
And it was roughly a similar, very quick slowdown in demand, which suggests to me that this social media thing going on, that they are getting a backlash from boycotts of people of people who are angry at Starbucks over the Israel-Palestine war.
Yeah.
And that just takes.
It's been interesting watching the Latin, and again with the visibility that we have on visitation data, it's been fascinating to look at the backlash on this type of social media issues that are out there. In the past, you generally could, if there was some sort of issue or some sort of incident that caused a lot of a viral moment in the social media scene, you could almost usually count on maybe 2-3 weeks of negative traffic. It was always interesting. I go back to the incident that happened in Starbucks in Philadelphia. With the manager kicking out people on. What was interesting about that is that actually the backlash was much worse outside of the city of Philadelphia. It's much worse nationwide. So you can kind of see the effect of that. It used to be kind of 2-3 weeks, and then things would kind of start to normalize. We've seen those periods a lot more prolonged. It's gotten a lot more severe, depending on whatever it might be. But every time these things seem to pop up, the hit has gotten a lot more severe and lasts a lot longer than they used to. So there's some staying power. I think you might be on something without it.
Yeah, yeah, it's persisted for a while.
Yeah.
Mid-November to wherever we're at. That's fairly significant. And, obviously they can recover.
They tend to do it. They
usually do, yeah. And Starbucks is not a dumb company.
No, they're a very smart company.
Right. I mean, the thing that surprises me is they actually don't talk about that more to investors. Because they did. They did.
Yeah, they did.
But they don't really, they could easily say this isn't we think this is a social media problem. We think it's temporary and it's going to, we just got to do a better job of messaging. We'll focus on this is this, and that sort of thing.
Very few brands do that, too. Very few brands talk about that, as I'm thinking about it here.
Right.
And is it something where they're going to feel like it's going to exacerbate the problem, too? Is it going to make it worse if we start to talk about it? And, whatever social media doubles down. I don't know. It's something that, yeah, you're exactly right. It does not get talked about outside of some isolated examples where very specific, where there's a remedy to it. But it's something that doesn't pop up a lot on earnings calls. You're right.
Right. No. Yeah. And, but you know what? Maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Right.
Maybe it's time for a new strategy. I've always appreciated that they've generally been upfront about this stuff. At least
right.
Wonder, Howard, they were always usually pretty quick to say, this is what happened. This is how we're going to solve it. You're right. That is not here this time.
Yeah.
And that's been something that has been a little bit different under the current leadership.
Right. I mean, I appreciated their candor about the whole, just generally about their quarter and how it does it well. That was a remarkable, that was a really remarkable quarter.
Yeah.
Because, it was worse if you think about it, because they had apparently a great promotion. So as negative as they were, which was down 3% same-store sales and down 7% traffic.
Yeah.
And it came with, I guess that lavender promotion worked as well as pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah.
And they still did -3.
Yeah. And obviously that's a complete disconnect with the rest of the category too. So coffee is one of those categories that generally is up right now on a year-over-year visitation trend. Some of that's, like we talked about, some of the smaller chains, some of that's return to office, some of that's other factors. But yeah, that was a clear deviation from what we're seeing, and caught a lot of people off guard on that too. And to your point, it was pretty sudden. Yeah, that was something that happened pretty quickly there. It wasn't like, you kind of start to see trends on a week-over-week basis. It happened pretty quickly.
Right. They were rolling, actually.
Yeah.
They were doing
they
great.
were one of the top stories in the category last year, looking at our data. Wingstop, Raising Cane's, they were right there on that.
Right. Group. I think they added like 1,400 locations in a 2-year period. They've They in the United States alone, they were doing really well.
They're more visitors than they've ever had before. And it's, in terms of adding number of visitors, they are one of the chains that we've seen grow the most, particularly at that size.
Yeah. That's why I just get a little concerned sometimes. Like, they were doing really well, and then and it turns south all of a sudden, and then they'll start looking internally for problems, and then one of them is going to be about value.
Yeah.
And a challenge, I think, with a brand like Starbucks is that you went through for so long being able to price the way they do.
Yes.
And then suddenly you're going to try to go away from that might be a risky strategy to me.
Yeah, that has usually gotten into trouble in the past. It's usually some sort of element. I don't think, value pricing, but maybe some of the afternoon promotion type stuff where they don't have to take down the price, because that is a slippery slope, and I don't expect that to happen for
Yeah, I wouldn't. So, what is your thoughts on full service right now? I mean,
it's an interesting question to be asking, because what we're seeing in both from the restaurants themselves as well as kind of the landlords, the mall owner operators, and other landlords, is it's kind of a reversal of what we saw early in the pandemic. After the pandemic, we saw obviously the full service category contract.
Yep.
But it was the large brands that were gaining a larger share of the smaller pies. So Darden and Cheesecake Factory and the normal names they'd expect on that. But something happened about 18 months ago. And all of a sudden, people got a little tired of the brands that were there and looking for something different. And so we've been hearing, entertainment's there. It's still doing very well. So no change in that. It's both the play-oriented entertainment guys that Dave & Buster, Pinstripes, Putt Shacks. It's the experiential dining guys like Pura and Den. But all of a sudden, it's kind of a resurgence on the independent and regional chains. Those are the ones that owner and operators are seeing drive more traffic to their malls, more traffic to their properties. And so it's kind of like, it's almost this idea of post-pandemic. People want to be almost influencers in their own circles. I want to be the first to this restaurant. I want to do something different. This old brand, it doesn't matter. But if I'm the first one to discover this new brand, it really helps to drive a lot of buzz and create excitement around it. So I think that's kind of interesting that we're starting to see the independent smaller brands claw back some of the visitation share that may have been lost. And they're starting to grow faster again, too. Some of these chains that maybe weathered the pandemic and got through the tough times are starting to grow again. So that's kind of the interesting thing on full service. Yes, visitations are down year over year, but a lot of that's just because there's a lot of chains that went out of business, too. But it's been interesting to kind of see this change in perception that happened. It's been pretty quick on that one. So it's been something that's going on. If we look at kind of year-over-year visitation for smaller chains under 10 units, it's actually pretty impressive results on a lot of them.
So it's like kind of going back almost to normalized idea. Like before the pandemic, we were talking about independents winning customers because, full service independents were winning customers because people historically will always prefer their local restaurant.
Yes.
Generally to a chain.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to full service, because, there's more unique. And these days I wonder if it's because, people want something for it. If they're going out, they want an experience. They want that restaurant to do what they want.
There's very much so. So what's interesting about the whole traffic pattern, if we look, it's really been a 2-year trend on this. Is we've seen, what we've discussed, negative traffic year over year for most categories, most trends. The big numbers on holidays, big numbers for events and holidays, and Mother's Day, Father's Day, Easter, Valentine's Day. If you look at the visitation data for that, we're back at pre-pandemic levels. It's just the periods in between that are a lot less. To your point, people want that experience. If I'm my budget's stretched, I'm having difficulty paying, but I still want to do something. I'm going to get the most bang for the buck for it. I'm going to make a big deal of it. What's interesting about visitation times at fine dining, one of the things that really caught my eye is we're actually about 10-15% higher in terms of the average dwell time for a fine dining visit than we were before. People really want to milk these visits. They want to get something out of it. So it's kind of just impressed me. Every other category you look at in the restaurant space is down. And a lot of that, takeout, delivery, it's just quicker dwell time. But when we look at fine dining, that's actually up. Casual dining's up, but that's largely the entertainment, where the entertainment dwell time is usually twice that of the casual dining. But if we look at kind of fine dining, where obviously there isn't the entertainment aspect, it's up 5, 10, 15% in a lot of cases. So people are trying to really stretch their visits at fine dining right now.
Huh.
And this whole event and holiday-driven mindset right now, it's been fascinating to watch.
Yeah, yeah. They want to, when they want to go out to eat,
They will pay.
they'll pay, and they want an experience. And apparently, they're going to spend their time doing it.
They're gonna be there for a while. So.
Yeah, but and then if they're, and then everything else they want it
Right
fast. They want it really quick, and they want, but they want it cheap and they want it really, really good.
Yeah, exactly. Hard combination. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it makes it a difficult environment.
It's almost like a lot of restaurants, and reminds me of Starbucks a bit. They're serving two audiences at the same time, and Starbucks built this brand on being an experience, but then mobile order and pay came around, and now you're trying to serve the experience customer at the same time they're trying to serve the convenience customer.
Right.
When you try to do both of the same box, generally speaking, it doesn't work for either group. You end up disappointing both groups, and so that's kind of gets back to knowing what you are and what you're not. It's just paramount of the restaurant industry, knowing what exactly need state you're serving, not only what cuisine type, but what are consumers looking at the most? What do they associate my brand with? And that's a challenge sometimes, but you can't try to be everything for everyone too.
Yeah, that's tough for Starbucks.
It's still a challenge. Obviously, we talked about that. It's still an issue that they haven't figured out yet.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but it's because you can't, they can't make money. They can't do what they do, like the numbers they do.
Yeah.
By just focusing on that experience.
No, they need to move that.
Yeah.
They need that convenience aspect. And they under Ross they had done like a replatforming of all the stores, looking at which ones serve an experience and which ones serve a convenience. And I think they made some progress there, but it seems like, and I think this is a big part of migration too. A lot of things have changed, and migration to work from home. It has changed some of the stores. The way they designed that store, in pre-pandemic times, that was great, but that's changed again. But people are using those stores differently now. And so that's maybe worth a visit and worth a relook on all these different things and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, their stores were built for one thing, and then ended up having to do another.
Yep.
And you to your point, that's exactly right. It's a very different, and it's just not quite the experience it used to be.
No,
because it's all focused, especially in the mornings. It's just focusing really intently on getting those coffees moved through, or whatever beverages are. I mean, everything about Starbucks is just vastly different. Like if you went into a coma like 10 years ago, just 10, and then you woke up and then your first thing was to go to Starbucks, you would not recognize.
It's not very some. It's a completely different experience at this point.
It is much more mobile ordering, and it has become. The first drive-through beverage. I mean, it's not, but it is a beverage. It's not a coffee concept anymore. It's a beverage concept. It is mostly cold and customizable, and it's ordered through the drive-through or mobile order. I mean, ridiculous. Like, and I think apparently mostly they're loyal customers.
Yeah.
And it's a very different company.
It's a very different experience at this point. And it's probably going to continue to go that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think the key for them, they are correct that they've got to figure that how to deal with both of these sets of customers.
Yeah.
Because that is a long-term challenge for them. Still don't think that's why that might be affecting them in some form or fashion.
The more you think about it, I think that in terms of the rank order, in terms of what's been going on, there is a social media issue. I think that's probably first. There is still some pricing, particularly on the more premium products.
Right.
That would be one. And then just, kind of the idea that people have shifted, that trade areas have shifted, and they have not been able to keep up the changes in store to adjust for that too. So I think that a number of the factors that kind of put it all together though.
Yeah, no, a ton. All right, RJ, this was great. Really appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
Appreciate it as always. Good times.
Never worry again about sales tax with Davo by Avalara. From collecting to filing to paying, Davo works seamlessly with your POS, backed by a guarantee that your taxes will be paid on time and in full. You take care of the business, we'll take care of the sales tax.